The hallway outside room 379 smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee, the kind of smell that clung to your clothes long after you left. It was early morning, but the lights were already too bright, humming softly above the pale blue floor. Nurses passed by with practiced calm, their shoes squeaking faintly, as if they were afraid to disturb the words that had just been spoken inside the room. "He may never walk again." Those words echoed louder than any alarm. Ethan Carter lay still on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles as though they held answers no one else could see. He was 17, tall for his age, with shoulders that once carried a varsity football jersey and dreams of college scouts and Friday night lights. Now those same shoulders felt impossibly heavy, pressed into a mattress he had not chosen. His father, Mark Carter, stood near the window, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He had heard bad news before: layoffs, broken bones, losses that stung, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing had taught him how to breathe after a doctor calmly explained that his son's spinal injury was severe and that recovery was unlikely. Across the room, Ethan's mother, Laura, sat frozen in a chair, her purse still on her lap, unopened. Her eyes were fixed on Ethan's legs, covered neatly by a thin hospital blanket. She wanted to lift it, to check, to prove the doctor wrong with her own eyes. But she didn't move. She was afraid of what she wouldn't see. The accident itself had been ordinary in the cruelest way. Rain-slick roads, a moment too fast, a sound like twisting metal. The kind of story people hear on the evening news and forget by dinner. But for the Carters, time had stopped at that intersection. When the doctor left, the room fell into a quiet so deep it felt heavy. Ethan swallowed hard. "So, that's it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is my life now?" No one answered right away. Mark turned, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Doctors don't know everything," he said, though his voice betrayed him. Laura reached for Ethan's hand, her fingers trembling as she squeezed it gently, as if he might break. Outside the room, life went on. Phones rang. Laughter drifted from somewhere down the hall. A child cried, then stopped. It felt unfair, almost offensive, that the world hadn't paused too. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the window with soft orange light, Ethan noticed something strange. From the hallway came the sound of humming, quiet, off-key, but oddly comforting. It grew closer, stopping right outside the door. Then, without knocking, a small boy peeked inside. He couldn't have been more than 10. He wore worn sneakers, a hoodie 2 sizes too big, and carried a folded piece of cloth under his arm. His eyes were curious, gentle, and unafraid. Eyes that didn't look at Ethan with pity. Instead, the boy smiled. "Hi," he said simply, as if this hospital room wasn't filled with broken dreams. "My name's Tyler. I think I'm supposed to be here." None of them knew it yet, but in that quiet moment, when hope felt like a word meant for other people, everything began to change. Tyler didn't step fully into the room at first. He lingered by the doorframe, rocking slightly on his heels, as if he were deciding whether this moment belonged to him. The folded cloth under his arm slipped a little, and he adjusted it carefully, like it was something important. Mark was the first to speak. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "I think you might be in the wrong room." Tyler shook his head. "No, sir, I'm not." His voice was soft but certain, the kind of certainty that didn't come from confidence but from belief. "My grandma told me to come here." Laura frowned, confused. "Your grandma works here?" "No, ma'am," Tyler replied, "but she helps people get better." The room went quiet again. Ethan watched the boy closely. Tyler wasn't looking at the machines or the wheelchair parked near the wall. He wasn't staring at Ethan's legs the way everyone else did. Instead, he looked at Ethan's face, really looked, like he was trying to understand who he was beyond the bed and the blankets. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Tyler," the boy said, smiling again. "And you're Ethan?" Ethan blinked. "How do you know that?" Tyler shrugged. "Your name's on the board." He pointed casually, as if that explained everything. Then after a short pause, he added, "My grandma says names matter. They remind us who we are when things get hard." Mark let out a quiet breath, unsure whether to laugh or ask the boy to leave. "Listen, Tyler," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Ethan's been through a lot today." "I know," Tyler said. "That's why I'm here." He finally walked in, placing the folded cloth on the chair beside the bed. It was old, faded at the edges, like it had been washed 1,000 times. Tyler smoothed it with his hands almost respectfully. "My grandma says sometimes doctors tell you what they can see," he continued, "but they can't always see what's still possible." Laura felt something tighten in her chest. She had heard encouragement before, empty words, well-meaning cliches. But this felt different. It wasn't loud or forceful. It didn't demand belief. It simply existed. Ethan hesitated, then asked the question he'd been holding in since the morning. "What if they're right?" he said. "What if this is it?" Tyler didn't answer right away. He climbed onto the chair so he was closer to Ethan's eye level. "Then we start with what you still have," he said. "Not what you lost." Mark raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think he still has?" Tyler looked at Ethan again, thoughtful. "He can listen. He can feel hope, even if it's tiny, and he can try." The word try hung in the air. A nurse passed by the open door and smiled at Tyler. "Visiting again?" she teased. "Yes, ma'am," Tyler said proudly. "I help." When she walked on, Laura wiped at her eyes, surprised to find them wet. For the first time since the accident, something inside her shifted. Not relief, not joy, but the faintest crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Ethan swallowed. "So, what do we do?" he asked. Tyler grinned, picking up the cloth. "First, or he said, we don't give up today." And somehow in that small, ordinary hospital room, that felt like the bravest plan anyone had offered. The next morning arrived quietly as if it were unsure it was welcome. Sunlight crept through the blinds in thin golden lines, stretching across the floor and brushing the edge of Ethan's bed. For a brief moment, before the weight of memory returned, he almost forgot where he was. Then he tried to move his legs, and the silence answered back. A knock came at the door. Before Mark or Laura could respond, Tyler slipped inside, carrying a small backpack that looked nearly as worn as his sneakers. He smiled like yesterday hadn't ended with whispered worries and unanswered questions. "You came back," Ethan said, surprised. "I said I would," Tyler replied simply. Mark studied the boy carefully. He had barely slept, his mind trapped between hope and fear. Part of him wanted to protect his son from disappointment. Another part, the desperate part, wanted to believe in anything that didn't end in loss. "What's in the bag?" Mark asked. Tyler set it down gently and unzipped it. Inside were ordinary things: a small towel, a plastic bowl, and a folded notebook with hand-drawn lines on the cover. Nothing that looked like a miracle. "My grandma's notes," Tyler said, tapping the notebook. "She says healing starts with patience." Laura exchanged a look with Mark. "We don't want to interfere with the doctors," she said carefully. "They have a plan." Tyler nodded. "So do we. We just start smaller." He dipped the towel into the bowl of warm water he'd filled from the sink and wrung it out. Then he paused, looking at Ethan. "Is it okay if I touch your feet?" he asked. Ethan hesitated. His feet felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Still, he nodded. Tyler worked slowly, gently wiping Ethan's feet, as if the action itself mattered more than the result. He didn't rush. He didn't look disappointed when nothing happened. He hummed quietly instead, the same off-key tune from the day before. Mark crossed his arms, skepticism tightening his jaw. This felt too simple, too small. How could something like this change anything? And yet, Ethan felt something. Not movement, but warmth, awareness, a reminder that his legs were still part of him. "What are you thinking about?" Tyler asked. "About who I was," Ethan replied. "Before all this." Tyler nodded. "My grandma says the body listens to the mind. If all it hears is goodbye, it forgets how to say hello." That night after Tyler left, a physical therapist visited. She moved Ethan's legs carefully, explaining exercises and timelines, her voice professional but cautious. "We'll do everything we can," she said. "But progress may be limited." Limited! The word echoed like a door half closed. When the room was quiet again, Ethan stared at his feet. He concentrated, harder than he ever had before. Nothing moved. Tears slipped down the side of his face. The next day, Tyler returned, and the next. Some days Ethan felt hopeful, other days angry. Frustration boiled over, and once he snapped, "What if this is pointless?" Tyler didn't argue. He just sat beside him. "Then we still show up," he said. "That's how you win against giving up." A week passed. Then one morning, as Tyler was wiping Ethan's feet, Ethan felt it, a faint twitch, so small it could have been imagined. "Did you see that?" Ethan whispered. Tyler's eyes widened, but he didn't cheer. He just smiled softly. "Yeah," he said. "Your body's starting to remember." But outside the room, doubt still waited, quiet, patient, and unwilling to let go. The twitch happened again the next day. This time, Ethan wasn't alone when he felt it. The physical therapist, Ms. Reynolds, stood at the foot of the bed, her clipboard tucked under her arm as she guided him through routine exercises. Tyler sat quietly in the corner, swinging his legs, unusually silent. "Try to focus," Ms. Reynolds said. "Just imagine the movement." Ethan closed his eyes. He pictured running, grass under his cleats, the roar of a Friday night crowd, the feeling of his legs pushing him forward. His jaw tightened with effort. Then it happened. His toes moved, just slightly, but they moved. Ms. Reynolds froze. "Ethan, did you do that?" He opened his eyes, afraid to answer. "Yes," he said, voice shaking. She leaned in closer, watching carefully. "Do it again." Ethan tried. Nothing. Still, the room felt different now. Charged, alert, like everyone was holding their breath. Ms. Reynolds straightened slowly, her expression unreadable. "That's encouraging," she said. "It doesn't change the road ahead, but it means there's still a signal." A signal. When she left, Mark sank into a chair, hands over his face. Laura laughed and cried at the same time, afraid that if she celebrated too loudly, the moment might disappear. Tyler finally spoke. "See? Your body's listening." Ethan exhaled, the weight on his chest just a little lighter. "I was scared to hope," he admitted. "What if it stops?" Tyler shrugged. "Then we keep going anyway." Days turned into weeks. The exercises became harder. Pain came and went. Some mornings Ethan woke up exhausted before he even started. But Tyler never missed a visit. He came after school, sometimes with scraped knees or homework still unfinished, and sat with Ethan through every win and setback. Word spread quietly through the ward. Nurses paused longer. Therapists asked questions. One afternoon, Ms. Reynolds watched Tyler closely as he encouraged Ethan through a difficult session. "You're good at this," she said to him. Tyler smiled shyly. "I just remind people what they already have." The day they tried standing, the room was full. Mark stood on one side, Laura on the other. Ms. Reynolds adjusted the support belt, explaining every step, her voice steady. "There's no pressure," she said. "We try, and if it doesn't work, that's okay." Ethan nodded, heart pounding. Tyler stepped closer, looking up at him. "I'll be right here," he said. With help, Ethan swung his legs over the side of the bed. The floor felt cold and unfamiliar beneath his feet. His knees trembled violently as they lifted him upright. For a split second, everything went silent. Then Ethan's legs held. Not strong, not steady, but holding. Mark covered his mouth. Laura whispered Ethan's name like a prayer. Ms. Reynolds kept her hands ready but didn't touch. "You're doing it," Tyler said softly. Ethan stood for 3 full seconds before collapsing back onto the bed, breathless, shaking, overwhelmed. It wasn't walking, but it was proof. That night, after everyone left, Ethan stared at his legs, tears streaming freely now. He didn't know how far he'd go. He didn't know if he'd ever run again. But for the first time since the accident, the future didn't feel closed, and Tyler, the boy who believed when belief felt impossible, had helped open the door. The day Ethan took his first step didn't arrive with music or announcements. It came quietly, like most life-changing moments do. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Rain tapped softly against the window, and the therapy room smelled faintly of rubber mats and disinfectant. Ethan stood between parallel bars, his hands gripping them tightly. His arms shook, sweat beading on his forehead. Not from effort alone, but from fear. Mark and Laura watched from the doorway, afraid to breathe. Tyler stood directly in front of Ethan, close enough that Ethan could see every detail of his face. The chipped tooth, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the unshakable calm in his eyes. "You don't have to be perfect," Tyler said. "You just have to try." Ms. Reynolds nodded. "Shift your weight," she instructed. Slowly. Ethan inhaled deeply. His left leg trembled as he moved it forward. For a moment it felt like his body was arguing with itself, muscle against memory, fear against hope. Then his foot touched the floor. One step. No one spoke. Tears blurred Ethan's vision as he realized what he'd done. His leg hadn't given out. The world hadn't collapsed. He was standing, really standing, because he had moved himself there. Laura broke first, sobbing openly. Mark pressed his hand to the wall, his shoulders shaking. Ms. Reynolds wiped her eyes and quickly looked away, pretending to adjust her notes. Tyler didn't cheer. He just smiled, wide and proud, like this was exactly how it was supposed to happen. "That's it," Tyler said softly. "You remembered." Recovery didn't end there. There were setbacks, hard days, and long nights where progress felt slow. But everything had changed. The word never no longer lived in the room. Weeks later, on Ethan's last day at the hospital, the staff gathered in the hallway. With a brace on his leg and a walker in front of him, Ethan took careful steps forward. Each one was deliberate, earned. Tyler stood off to the side, quieter than usual. "Hey," Ethan said when he reached him. "You never told me. Why me?" Tyler shrugged. "My grandma says people cross paths for a reason." He paused. "And she says sometimes kids can see things adults forget." Mark knelt in front of Tyler, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave my son hope," he said. "That changed our lives." Tyler shook his head. He did the work. I just reminded him he could. As they said goodbye, Ethan realized something that stayed with him long after the hospital doors closed behind them. Healing wasn't just about muscles or movement. It was about belief, shared, protected, and passed on. Years later, when people asked Ethan what saved him, he never started with doctors or therapy or even determination. He started with a boy who didn't believe in limits. So here's the question that still lingers. Do you think miracles come from breaking the rules or from believing in someone when no one else will? Before you leave, help this story reach someone who needs hope today. Like the video. Comment. Do you believe one person can change another person's destiny? Subscribe for more emotional, true-to-life stories that inspire millions. Stay safe.